join me in welcoming our guest, Lisa Rebora, head of Global Lithium at Equinor. Lisa boasts over 25 years of trailblazing experience in the energy sector and has held senior roles at industry giants such as Schlumberger, BP, and now Equinor, where she spearheaded international exploration and sustainability efforts and is currently leading Equinor's global lithium team. Lisa, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Kisa. Pleasure to be here.
Absolutely. Well, first of all, you have such great experience with huge companies, household names. I'm wondering if there is a common theme in terms of going from one firm from a BP to an Equinor, in your history that you've really pulled on, a key tool from your toolkit that has served you well in each of those different firms that have, I'm assuming, vastly different cultures.
Yeah, wow, that's a good question to start with. So it's been very intentional for a start. I think big companies both give you kind of huge portfolios to work across internationally. So for me, travel and learning different cultures and about different resources around the world. In one big company, you can be exposed to so many projects and portfolios in that way. I think secondly, there's a social and transformative element to it. I think big companies have a massive responsibility for kind of pioneering the way we work, the way we do business in different countries. And actually, I will give you an example because BP, I used to work in Angola when it was really starting to emerge and grow as an oil and gas business offshore. And our then CEO, Lord John Brown, he was the godfather of corporate social responsibility. As a company, we were paying large signature bonuses to go into those countries. And he was the first leader and company that publicly disclosed what we paid in terms of hundreds of millions of dollars back in the 2000s to enter that country. And I was so inspired by my leader at that time, who was really trying to make a change, because we could have got kicked out of the country, right? It could have really upset a lot of people, but the intention was, we want to see where that money is channeled so that it actually is a force for good, and it's reinvested back into the country instead of somewhere else, which can happen, right? So I think big companies play a massive role in kind of social responsibility. And the last one is personally for me as a working parent, it's allowed me to kind of raise a big family. I've got 3 incredible girls, to have extended maternity leave, to work part-time when I needed to, when I wanted to spend more time with the girls. And it's not a given that you can do that in really small companies. So there was a very personal reason for doing it as well.
You've called out a couple of different tenets of what I think most folks would agree to be really great corporate culture. We hear a lot about corporate culture in this day and age, and not a lot of it's positive, but those points, being able to travel, exposure inside the company and outside, as well as maternity leave, parental leave, great. I'm wondering, in that same tone, thinking about leadership and what you've learned about the best qualities of a really good leader, a really good transformational leader, what stood out for you with your background in history?
I like to work for leaders who are really bringing their team, their people with them, right? Because working in isolation doesn't get you there, but really inspiring and empowering a team behind you that shares and owns the strategy, that can articulate that strategy themselves because they believe in it, they know which direction they're going in. That kind of comes out at the top for me. And listening, not a lot of leaders listen all the time. Actually, you learn a lot by listening. I think my big message, at this conference, and for extractive industries in general is the importance of working together in partnerships and building the relationships with others to understand, okay, this is what I'm good at. Maybe not as good at this. Let's work together. Let's combine forces, because I'm convinced when you do that, you get there faster.
Yeah.
So I think this whole collaboration theme is a big one in my career.
So, and I'd love to talk about partnerships. One of the things, and I guess it's a different type of partnership, you've worked with big companies, and we know a lot of large companies have a lot of M&A action going on. And so taking what you said about corporate culture and around leadership, I'm wondering, when you have a firm that basically can go out and acquire other firms, what are some of the best practices? Because when we hear acquisition, especially if you are being acquired, you get a little nervous. Who is this new leader? What's going to happen? What have you seen happen specifically in those acquisition M&A sorts of times that you said, you know what, if you're going to acquire a company, that's the way to do it? If we have to make this move that might be a bit challenging, telling folks that this is not a good fit anymore, how do they go about doing that in a way that you say that's a good way to do it in this particular environment?
Right. Well, I think I've seen good ways and I've seen not so good ways in doing it, right? Some very big corporate mergers in my career. I worked for Arco, which was then taken over by BP. I worked for Statoil Hydro, which had just merged at the time, which was Equinor in its previous name. So culture and how you bring those teams together is right at the heart of whether those M&As actually work and are successful. For us in the lithium space and this recent partnership we announced with Standard Lithium, part of the screening exercise was obviously the technical and the commercial due diligence. It's the project itself that you start with and the resource. But more than anything else, we are very focused on the kind of cultural fit. And I think spending time to build that relationship before a transaction is important. We were actually talking to Standard for, Jesse's right here, a long time, since 2017, in fact 2018. So just knowing how you can work together over the long term, with a very practical, can-do mindset. I think there's a lot of hubris, as you'd expect, in this lithium space, and I don't know that Equinor as a company needs to shout from the rooftops what we're good at or what we're not. We just get on and do it, and we deliver it, right? And I think that's the most important thing at the end of the day, how you execute, how you work with your partners and the communities and all the stakeholders around you.
And one of the fascinating parts is that in this lithium space, it is very much global, so we're talking about different cultures, different languages, where you are, where you want to be in terms of new markets. And I'm wondering, how do you master that? You mentioned that was one of the things that attracts you to firms. How do you master, okay, I need to understand how to engage with these new partners, with these new team members, different cultural backgrounds, maybe different languages. How do you master that to be able to get beyond that learning curve?
Yeah. So I think living overseas most of my life, again, a very intentional thing. It's not just about the projects you're working on, right? It's not just about the resource. I think you have to understand what the motivations of a country and a region are. I think you have to understand their social values. You have to understand what economic development looks like for them, and then you have to help steward them on the way and bring all your experience with you, the good and the bad. And I mean that, know what hasn't worked in the past and what not to do versus what works across multiple markets and jurisdictions. So I would say that.
Great. I've heard the term from you, intentional, twice. So in terms of your career, did you just, know from day one when you were in primary school, early school, this is what I want to do. I have a focus on nature. I'm interested in this. Or how did you get there? How did you understand your why and understand how to get to fulfill that why?
Yeah. Right. So this, I have been looking back on my career quite a bit of late, and I was not that intentional when I was younger. I just did what my heart told me I wanted to do. I was lucky. I had parents that just allowed me to explore. The first person that went to university in the family, so I don't think they knew how to counsel or advise me, so they just let me go and follow my path. And all the way, that's what I've done. And it's what gives me energy. It's what drives me. I've done one job in my career. I'm not going to mention the company because it wasn't their fault. Okay. Can I say that? It was the job. I was bored. It wasn't the kind of job I wanted to do. But I know what doesn't get me out of bed in the morning versus what really, makes me look forward to spending the bulk of my time away from my family, right? That's got to really, it's got to really drive you. You've got to feel very passionate about it. So intention is important.
How do you get there? You said, I heard you say, I listened to my core. That's what really got me there. How can a person who's a professional get to truly understand what it is that motivates them and what will make them excited to get up in the morning as opposed to just, okay, this is how I get my paycheck, so let me get ready to leave and go to the office? What can really take us there to help us understand what our own motivations are?
Yep. So that's a good question. For me, I mean, it's very easy and comfortable to do what you're good at and stick to it. And I've deliberately pushed myself at the boundaries to different roles that I didn't plan or expect to do. They've been offered to me, and I've really gone away and thought, I could get something out of that. I could offer something back. Sustainability is one, right? I headed up our sustainability and safety team in Equinor in 2015. And I came into that role thinking, I'm not sure I have all the expertise to do this. I have lots of practical, operational experience, international experience, but kind of environmental evaluations for community liaison work. I really had to trust all the people around me, had to empower them. So stepping outside of your comfort zone just continually develops you as a leader, as a human being. And that's been important for me. Every single role is always a stretch, always, learning something new.
It sounds to me that, being inspired, and I'm sure you have mentees who you speak with and inspire them, is really important. I'm wondering, you mentioned your parents and how they let you fly. I'm wondering, in addition to them, do you have others who've inspired you in this journey?
Yep. So I think for a lot of female leaders, the fact that there are fewer of us in senior roles is a challenge, right? You really want to see a role model and someone that you want to be, right? Or that represents your values. And I think in an oil and gas career and an extractive resource career, there's not enough of those, right? So that's important. I did have one female boss that completely opened my eyes to the importance of being yourself, not trying to fit the mold, because there's no way you can fit the molds. You stand out, right? You're different. But to be vulnerable, to be open, to be your authentic self, and that's actually when you're at your best. And
can you take us through an example of when you had to implement that? So when did you show up and make that course correction or that pivot to that authenticity? Can you give us an example of that in your working life?
Yeah. Well, I think when you're working a lot of opportunities, being very honest and challenging your team and pushing them to give you their real honest opinion, not just what they present on a glossy PowerPoint. I'm very inquisitive. I ask a lot of questions. I'm looking for honesty and transparency, and I have to behave in the same way, right? I can't expect my team to deliver that if I'm not representing exactly the same attributes. And then I think, as we get older, you've got a lot to share, a lot to give back. I spend a lot of time with other leaders and professionals who are, looking to develop themselves and they want some guidance. That's important, I think, to spend time, to make time for that. And to be honest, things don't always go the way you plan. Life throws some, hurdles at you. So just being open and sharing those. I like to think Equinor, so our values, one of our values is caring, right? When we carry them around on our badge. Back in, when was it, 2009, when I first joined, having one of our values as caring on our badge from other companies and industries was almost something that was mocked or joked about, like caring, not performance, not just all about success. And I do think that many people I work with demonstrate that caring principle, right? And acknowledging that life can be tricky. We've come out of COVID. It's been hard for people, and taking care of your colleagues, your team, being vulnerable and open makes a difference.
I'm interested in hearing about a time when you mentioned earlier that life sometimes throws hurdles. I'm interested in hearing about a time that maybe when you were going through it, it seemed like you were at the deepest point, whether it was getting feedback or whether it was literally a business that faced a headwind or a tailwind that couldn't withstand. Tell us about that time where you felt it was one of the darkest points, but you were forced to grow. And so if you could share with us the point and what you did, what steps you took to make sure that you grew from that and that you emerged from that stronger or better or more powerful than you were.
So I again, going back to stepping outside your comfort zone. We, middle of COVID, almost towards the end of COVID, had a big reorganization as a company. I took on a role which was mandated to identify future revenue streams for Equinor within the energy transition space. Soon after, the Ukraine war happened, right? So for Equinor, as a big oil and gas player in Europe, we had to pivot all of our attention to getting gas to Europe. It was all about energy security. And I can understand why my leaders and my company were entirely focused on that. It was a kind of a bigger mandate. At the same time, my team and I were really trying to figure out, this space, whether it was green fuels or geothermal or batteries or lithium or whatever it was, how can we launch a new business in this space? And there was some big learnings about understanding, well, first about how to work within a big corporate when you're trying to be an agile startup, small team, and deliberately trying to work differently and do something different, new business models, new ways of working, new partnerships. That's tough for a big corporate that is very focused on, what their bread and butter looks like. So I think one of the key learnings was to be as inclusive in that journey as you can, to bring them on the same journey with you, because we learned so much by talking to other companies, by working in different ecosystems. And when you bring all of that back in one go, it's too much to consume and digest. So I think I learned that for big companies where there's a lot of decision makers, a lot of stakeholders involved, you need to educate yourselves together. And they need to see their role and how they can support you in that. So really identifying people in the organization who can influence and help you shape that new business and bring them on board. That was definitely a key learning. And not taking it personally, you put your heart and soul into these businesses. And some of them succeed. Lithium did. But that's not a given. And I think coming from an explorationist background, I feel like I've learned to dust my knees off a few times and acknowledge not everything goes the way you plan. But I felt perhaps a bit too close to this. It was so important to get this new business across the line that it probably became too personal. And you have to learn to distance yourself somewhat. So I think that's been good for me personally as a leader, is not to get... be able to let your baby go. Is that the word? There's a phrase around that.
But what a huge challenge. So being authentic is key, but then but being able to distance yourself is an important tool as well. It sounds like it could be a tricky line to walk.
I think it comes down to making objective decisions, right? There's a wide outcome space in these new value chains, right? There's a lot of uncertainty, and many people, many leaders are uncomfortable with all of that uncertainty. It's uncertainty in the resource, uncertainty in the policy, the regulations, how fast this business is going to scale, the market, the demand. It's just layer and layer of uncertainty. And I think you have to be able to navigate that and work with multiple kind of work streams in parallel, and delegate, share the load across, and that goes back to partnerships. So, be as objective as you can, but be able to tolerate a certain amount of risk to get there. And be as simple as you can. I think simplicity is, that's a learning. Every big project I've worked on in big companies, when we all look back, and I talk to some of the people I work with on big projects, whether it's Angola or Egypt or wherever, going as simple and as fast, in a responsible way as you can is the key to success. And I'll take that with me with every project I work on going forward. It's so exciting and intellectually stimulating to come up with all the bells and whistles, but they're often not necessary.
Simple, fast, and responsible. I'm envisioning you having conversations. I know that you talked about being able to have the parental leave, conversations with your children. And I suspect that you are doing a lot of what you do to make the world better for them. What if there was one thing that you would say to your children that you would encourage others to think about sharing with their children as well, so we could all get to this better world together? What's that one thing that you would share with your own kids as well as other children?
So it's really simple, and it goes back to what I think I was allowed to do. It's to follow your heart, do what you're good at, and make a difference. And you will make a difference, right? Even if you feel like that contribution is small, the sum of all the moving parts in there just keeps moving and progress going in the right direction.
I'm wondering too, Lisa, as you think about the future, you are clearly a leader in your space. You mentioned that there is a lack of diversity, so you're definitely one that has a platform. I'm wondering, as you think about legacy, what do you want your legacy to be, not just within Equinor, but obviously there, but within this space? What do you want to leave behind?
Yeah. So I am a great believer in putting all the effort in working towards a net zero future. And I come from an oil and gas world, right? I understand it's going to take time to replace oil and gas, and that we don't switch the taps off overnight. So I have a great respect for my colleagues doing that in the best way they can. But I want to help transition, whether that's through electrification and scaling up a new lithium business and being a strong leader and representative in that sector. That really matters to me. I mean, that would be my legacy, right? I think if we can succeed in a commercially scaled new industry that is sustainable for the future, that would delight me. Yeah.
So it sounds like leading from the heart is definitely central to who you are and how you move forward. Being able to really focus on listening is something that many leaders need to think about because you learn from listening, as well as being able to look at culture and be able to embrace culture in various ways. That's a way that we can move forward from a partnership perspective as well as from an intra with employees perspective. Being able to quickly pivot is something that many firms and individuals could definitely learn from. And the honesty and transparency as a leader is key.
I think that's a good sum up.
Good sum up. Well, thank you for such a great and inspirational talk. Lisa Rebora, thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much, Casey.
And thank you, everyone who joined us today live and in person, as well as those who are looking at the recording. It's such a pleasure to be with you. Don't forget to subscribe to catch up on all of our episodes. You can find these on YouTube, Spotify, Apple, Podbean, SoundCloud, or wherever you get your content. And if you want to find out more about the fabulous events that we're having in this space, all you got to do is head to the events section at FastMarkets.com. Thank you for joining. I'm Keisha Shreen.